Thanks. Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome to the Banff and Buchan Area Committee on Tuesday, the 16th of June 2026. I will ask the Emma to take a second, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask if the following councillors in attendance? Councillor Bell.
Yes.
Councillor Cassie.
Present.
Councillor Cox.
Present.
Councillor Filliter.
I'm here.
Councillor Sutherland.
Yes, present.
Councillor Mayor.
Present.
Councillor Maynard.
Good afternoon, President.
And Councillor Reynolds.
Present.
Thank you, Chair. We've got apologies from Councillor Stuart Adams still, and Councillor James Adams will be joining us shortly.
Thank you. The next item on today's item number 11, Landscape Services Work Programme for 26-27, and we have Kenneth Regan and Jim Robertson as the officers presenting the paper. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Thank you for the invitation to present to you today, and I'm pleased to seek your approval for Landscape Services Work Programme for 2026-27. Following the budget setting by full council on the 27th of February, the landscape team have developed the proposal set out and shown in Appendix 1. It's important to note that the available resources for 2026-2027 present a more challenging environment for the delivery of some maintenance activities compared to previous years. In response, the service continues to explore opportunities to mitigate these pressures, including working closely with local community groups to support the delivery of certain works where their capacity exists. We will continue to operate within the resources available while maintaining service delivery as effectively as possible. The report outlines a range of work and activities for the coming year, many of which reflect ongoing engagement with local members, communities and other stakeholders. The proposed programme seeks to balance the diverse needs of users of our parks and open spaces. This includes enhancing and improving areas for biodiversity while also ensuring that we protect and maximise the value of the public investment. Members will be aware that Aberdeenshire Council's Pollinator Action Plan aims for at least 10% of public green space to be enhanced and managed for pollinators. Work is ongoing through our green space officers to demonstrate that this target has been achieved, and early indications suggest there is potential to exceed this 10% commitment. In addition to the Council's core work programme, the final year's allocation of Scottish Government Player Renewal Fund is about to commence, with 14 play areas and player parks across the area benefiting from this fund. Finally, Appendix 2 shows a comparison of spend across the 6 areas for the current year, which members may be of interest to members. Jim Robertson, as you know, is the Landscape Officer for Banff and Buchan, and who's also on the call, and I are happy to take any questions members have. And thank you again for inviting me to make this presentation.
Thank you, Ken. Councillor Reynolds, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, Ken, for that presentation. It's good to see you again. I've got a number of comments, Ken and Jim, so I don't mind if these are observations on the report, and what I would ask, I mean, obviously you might sort of come back on certain issues as you can, but it's really to ask you to reflect on some of these and maybe come back in due course, because a lot of my points reflect the point that you made, Ken, about the challenging circumstances in which landscape services are engaging with. And so none of this actually is a criticism of officers. I mean, I realise it's a consequence largely of the landscape, budgetary wise, financially, and all the rest of it. So don't take any of this personally. A lot of the information in this report emphasises really that the change in landscape in terms of the work that you're having to do in fostering partnerships with local community associations and trusts, Ken. And we have great examples of organisations, bodies like Banff and Buchan that do a superb job here. But one of the problems that I want to share with you is that in a way, there's a sort of downloading of statutory responsibilities onto the voluntary sector, and rural areas like Banff and Buchan have got varying levels of community capacity. So that means that it's a bit of a postcard lottery which our residents pick up on, because one area differs very much from another area, and especially less organised villages, they can be adversely impacted. And so we get, as you can well imagine, both of you, so many points of contact from constituents that are saying, I mean, one particular constituent that contacted me recently, along with my ward colleagues, said, they went to Ballater recently, and they look at the town centre of Ballater, and they look at the town services in Ballater, and they say, why is Banff and Buchan, why are Banff and Buchan not like that? Why is Banff and Macduff not like that? What are the reasons for the differences there? So on the back of that, I think one of the failings in this report, which is systemic, it's not something that just applies to this paper, but Ken, there's no localised expenditure that's identified. It lacks, and by that I mean there's no clear ward by ward breakdown of where money is physically being spent. We don't know what the exact projected hours are or materials that are allocated to Banff, Macduff, Fraserburgh and rural villages. There's not that sort of, when constituents come to us and they say, why isn't this being done? They've got they can only speak about their own patch, but it's like we don't have that detailed breakdown ward by ward as to what the issues are, what the resources issues are, ward by ward. There's a lot of high profiled stuff which is in this paper. And I do wonder that in the sort of place-based approach that we have here, whether, for the points that I've just made, Ken, that, where are the IIAs in this? Where are the impact assessments that properly assess how budget cuts that you face, like grass cutting and play park maintenance, where's the IIA that identifies certain wards, certain areas in wards where there's an impact that really has a material issue with a changing demographic, children and others. Where is that detailed IIA that enables us to go back to our constituents in some ways? So to finish, I do really wonder, and you've made reference to this, Ken, about the Scottish Government. I wonder whether the current environment, and I'd be interested in your thoughts on this, not least around things like play park renewals, but in terms of Scottish Government funding, it's creating a sort of stop-start capital project rather than sustainable long-term revenue maintenance. And that's a real issue and a challenge for you. I realise that. But the one thing I would ask is that there's some sort of good takeaway, but there should be a guarantee that we can provide to our constituents that external capital funding like this is not just masking what the council is doing in terms of withdrawing from basic cyclic maintenance. So there's a lot there, which is why I said just take it away. But I'm passing on what a lot of constituents in detailed communications have said, because it really matters to them. I mean, this landscape services, as you well know, otherwise you wouldn't be doing the job that you do as well as you can. It affects mental health and well-being. We're still in that sort of post-COVID environment in some respects, but when there is a really good landscape, as was identified in Ballater, for example, it differs. The mental health and well-being of our constituents differs sometimes, I would suggest, than when they see a really struggling service as it applies to Banff and Buchan. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Reynolds, I wonder if it's more a place and well-being assessment rather than an IIA that's required.
Yeah, well, whatever you call it, it's the idea. The idea is that there should be some. We never want IIAs to be some sort of tick box exercise. So whatever the exercise is, I mean, it may be that you're right, Doreen, but we need some sort of consideration to how we properly assess at this area committee how budget cuts are made and impacts on different aspects and parts of our communities. Thanks.
Yeah. You find that some of the smaller villages have more capacity and enthusiasm to undertake these works. Ken?
Yeah, Chair, just to come back on a couple of points that Councillor Rabbit, I think you're correct in saying that the larger communities get, the less community involvement we seem to find, and we do struggle in some of the larger settlements to engage with groups. So that's a challenge for us. There also, it's something which is often cited to us. We often get people who compare sites to site, and it's not always a fair comparison, because so we have teams based throughout the Shire in different areas, and they'll all maintain both the open space as well as maintain all the burials in those areas. So the example that Councillor Reynolds made about Ballater compared to Banff and Buchan is possibly the busiest, one of the busiest areas we've got for burials. And as members will know, that the team's priority is burials. When a burial comes in, that takes priority and precedence over all the other work. And that can have an impact on our core work, particularly during this current time where we're not taking any seasonals on as a result of the latest cuts. So that's had an impact on our ability to keep things moving when multiple burials come in, which often happens in Banff and Buchan.
And then in the back of that, can I ask if the data for that is then taken into consideration with the budget allocation?
I'll have to come back to you on that, Chair, if that's okay. I'll speak to the landscape manager, and one of us will come back to you on it, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Can I just? Yeah.
Sorry.
No, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but just very, very briefly, the comparison with Ballater is quite interesting, is it not, Ken? Because you're talking about tourism, and Banff and Buchan, obviously we're talking about tourism. So I'll give you a very simple illustration very quickly, that this particular constituent, and I happened to spend quite a bit of time in Ballater back in 2024, but they noticed, for example, in Ballater, that when it comes to grass cutting, there isn't that gap, physically a gap, for example, in terms of the maintenance side of things, and patches of grass which are left uncut around certain areas, which are cut in Ballater. But they're saying, I've just been to Ballater, they don't, but in Banff and Buchan, we seem to have a problem here. It's like when we're maintaining certain areas and patches of grass, it's quite obvious that it's not been done as it should be done. Now that's a generalization, and I'm not belittling anybody in the service. Again, it might be to do with hours or whatever, but do you take the point? In Ballater, they're saying it's done, it's done, the grass cutting is done, and the weed removal is done in a particular way that's really, really brilliantly done, but it doesn't seem to apply in Banff and Buchan. Thanks.
What I just says, Chair, is that again, I don't. With smaller settlements like Ballater, that you're going to have groups who perhaps assist with the teams with things like weeding. We're also different parts of the country, so when grass cutting starts, we might have some areas which start grass cutting in March. In other areas, it'll be the end of March, beginning of April before grass cutting. So all the different geography of the Shire can have an impact on the rate of growth and how things appear. And again, when it depends on when a visitor sees an area of grass, when it's within the cycle of the team. So the teams go out on a 10-day cycle for the grass cutting, and obviously if burials come in, that can impact that 10-day cycle. So a grass cutting which is on a 10-day regime might become 15 days, and depend on when that's seen at that particular time, the grass could look very long. well, and if you go on to ballot and the grass has been cut a day or two before, it appears shorter. We often get this cited to us with up here. You know, members of the public will go to certain burial grounds and say that why can't the grass in Banff Cemetery look like it does in Port Lethen or something in Port Sawyer? So people do compare, but it's unfair because the teams, it might just come at a different part of their cycle, their grass cutting cycle.
Okay, so just before I take the other members in, I would appreciate, Ken, if you could go back and find out. I mean, we want to be a data-driven council so that our spend goes to where it is most required. And
Yep.
if we have an issue with that, then we need to look at that. Okay, Councillor Cox.
Thank you. And apologies if this sounds like a greeting meeting, Ken and Jim, but there are particular issues around about here. It must have been 2 years ago. We asked what would enable the communities to get more involved, and nothing really has happened other than the communities have just decided just to get on with it, and we see that in and around Banff for the training days and Bloom. But there is a constraint, because when somebody was wanting to do some work, and Jim and I emailed Jim this morning. So we've got landscape services, and then we've got roads, and the roads are saying no, landscape are saying yes. So it's how we can empower our communities to do more, because the feedback I get is the council won't let us, or they've been told to stop. In regard to teams, I understand there used to be 7 in this squad in the Banff, and it's down to 2. So recognising you could have a lot of funerals one week and none the next, and this is probably leading to the grass growing longer when it should have been cut, but because of the pressures of other work. So it takes us back to Glenn's point in terms of resources. Have we got sufficient resources? Do we have sufficient equipment? Do we have the tools? And I think this message has to go somewhere, because we're throwing a lot of money at tourism. We're financing the DMO. A lot of groups are putting on lots of events to attract tourism. But the quote from this weekend, visitors to the area, was, "What a beautiful place, but it looks so tired and run down." What's wrong? It's been the last time they were here. There's been a huge transformation. So on one hand, we've got place plan, on one hand, we've got tourism, on one hand, we've got roads, deciding what's best. The priorities are what the community wants. So you said lack of engagement or getting people to engage, and I think they've just said, well, what is the point? And we as councillors could certainly put you in contact with the various community groups. And then our local businesses willing to go out and spray the weeds, and all they need is, they've got qualified people to do it, but all they need is that signing off, tick the box, risk assessments, protective gear, all that kind of things. Because we're going to have to shift to more community involvement and turn our hands to businesses who are willing to set aside a budget to enable our town centres to look far better. But we're getting to the point that Low Street in Banff was almost green right through the Plainstones, right outside the council building, the Market Arch toilets, that area in there. And now, in the scale of things, they're not huge, and it would probably only take a day for somebody to go around, or even half a day to spray. Then we have the waste service who go around, he's sweeping the streets, doing his very best. And I've suggested he has a rouser to spray one street one day, another street another day, and before you know it, he's gone around the whole street. But he's trying to keep the streets tidy with litter, but we've got this massive overgrown weeds in our area. So key question, Chair, is how are we going to empower our communities without giving them the power to do it and not the constraints? Where are we in the budget? And it's all right saying we've got a budget, but we don't have the manpower or the equipment. We've got people not working because the machine's broken. And if we don't have a big enough squad, that then leads to huge costs. And somebody messaged me at the weekend to say that he saw landscape people out working at the weekend. So on one hand, we're cutting back budgets, but because, and I totally accept the fact that when you fall behind. Immediate action has to be taken in an extra day in the week would make that difference, but it is a cost that maybe the budget in one hand has been cut, but we're actually spending more money in the other hand to catch up. Our graveyards are very, very emotive. A lot of visitors go there, certainly overseas, and we're seeing the graveyards. Then they're cut in the long grass. It's just not good. Now, I appreciate you have got your budget. You've got to comply with what's been set in that budget. But the message I plead is, do we have the equipment, and is there a potential of looking at this funding, particularly in this area, because we've got lots of football pitches, a lot of cemeteries, the historic aspect of this area, and we contrast with the multi-million pounds going into other destinations and be promoted, whether it's Aberdeen or get the cruise ship people up the coast, up the side, but we're getting nothing. We're getting the crumbs, and our tourism is a different product, and it's a higher spend product than some of the bus tours. So that's my plea, Chair. Endorse what Councillor Reynolds said, that we need to look at this as a place and what the budget's required to deliver the expectation and to get our community on board, and we have to empower our communities and give them the positive approach. If they want to go and do something, as long as they carry out, tick all the boxes, they should not be stopped from doing that. And finally, this disconnect between one service to the next all has to be joined up as part of that place plan. So, but I will thank the guys, Jim, and for all the work he does. And I will say, one of the officers who always responds back to my emails, and that's really helpful. It's fine having that dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you. Ken, do you want to come back?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Cox. I think we are keen to work with communities, and so if any member on here has a group who want to do work or any ideas, please put them in contact with Jim or myself, and we'll happily discuss with them. I guess one of the issues we've had, and we had this during COVID, with lots of community-spirited groups wanting to come out and assist when we were grass cutting, we just have to control, temper their enthusiasm, and make sure that whatever they do, we do it safely. And that perhaps is why Councillor Cox might receive sort of more negative responses from roads colleagues, because obviously we've got to make sure we keep people safe. So whatever activity we do, it has to be done safely, and the last thing we need is anybody to get injured or hurt or damaged property as a result of some sort of activity which we've endorsed or encouraged.
Okay. Thank you. Just for the minute, I would just like to add that Councillor James Adams has now joined the meeting. Councillor Sutherland, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ken and Jim, for attending the committee today. It's really good to see you, and to thank you for the work that you do in Banff and Buchan. The one thing I would like to bring your attention and ask you a wee bit about is the grass cutting in the graveyards. Now, it was brought to our attention to the Inveralchie graveyard wasn't being cut as regular as it used to be, and there was complaints about that. But by the time that we actually looked into it, it was done. So within a few days of the complaint arising, the complaint did arrive. And then again, a couple of days ago, Reithan have been in touch with us with a similar complaint, and this morning, again saying within a few days of making the complaint at the Community Council on Monday, it's been cut today or yesterday. However, the grass has been left all over the place and hasn't been tidied away, so there's piles of grass lying beside the graves. So what's happened here? Is there something happened? And have we maybe stretched it a wee bit too far and we could rein it in a bit? What, can you tell me a wee bit about that, please? Thank you.
So all grass cutting in our cemeteries should be cut on a 10-day cycle, but as I say, it's not an exact science, and that sometimes gets stretched. But particularly when you factor in weather conditions, or we have excessively wet weather, that can impact some sites that we go on because we don't want to damage the site. Staff sickness, machinery breakdown. And I think all those factors have come into play. Certainly in the north, we've had issues with staffing and some breakdowns of equipment, which obviously impacts. And throw into the equation then a few burials, and you can see how the 10-day cycle can slip to probably every 15 days. Now, we do have capacity. If it gets particularly long, we do have machinery which can cut and collect as a one-off to get us back on track again, to try and avoid where we cut it and leave large amounts of arisings on the surface. So I'll speak to Jim and we'll speak to the supervisor if we get to those situations. Now, for those, it's really down to the individuals, to the teams, to sort of say, well, this site's, it's gone out of hand. We need to cut and collect this one. So we need that feedback from the team. So we'll try and get them to encourage them to be more responsive and to think that way, to try and get the round back on track. It might need the odd cut and collect, which means that the next time it's cut, we're not leaving huge amounts of grass clippings on the surface, which then draws complaints.
Yeah, thank you. It's such a sensitive thing, and especially when it's been brought up at community councils. It seems to be much more sensitive than the odd bit of grass beside the road that's not cut. It's where the loved ones are buried, and it's very emotive, and we definitely get told faster about that, and it is a concern that we're maybe not attending to it as well as we could do. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate any effort you can make to make sure it gets done within the allotted time, and the slippage is kept to a minimum. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Sullivan, because that one of the ones I was going to talk about. And in Inveralgie as well, after it had been cut again, there was a lot of reported damage to the memorials and to the flowers that were beside the memorials. And I think it was really distressing, but that was raised at the community council. But at the community council, when my 3 colleagues and I were at it, they actually spoke about trying to maybe develop a friends of the cemetery. And perhaps this is something that could be encouraged and given support rather than being told, no, you can't do that. So maybe that's something for the future. And it's the same with weeds in the street. I mean, one of my neighbours has been out spraying all the weeds in my street. I'm not sure he should have been doing that, but there's nobody else doing it. So it was it's supporting our communities. I think it's really important. So if it could, thank you.
Chair, I'd just like to say that Friends of Cemeteries, Friends of Parks is something we're looking to work with groups. It's amazing that the sites where we do have Friends group, the little things that can be done which can enhance these parks, not just edging paths off. It's a small task, but it makes a massive difference. So we are very keen to speak to any individuals or groups who want to create a Friends of a group to any of the cemeteries or our parks and open spaces. So again, the plea is if members have names, put them in contact with Jim and me, and we'd happily discuss that with them. When it comes to the street weed spraying, members will know that we spray the weeds on behalf of the roads department. The budget we get given from them doesn't allow us to spray every street in every settlement. So we try and concentrate on from the place plan or the academy towns. We will spray the town centres, and that's what concerns me. What Councillor Cox was talking about, Banff looking at a bit of a mess. So that the town centres will be sprayed, plus any major transport hubs, so train or bus stations into those settlement centres, as well as any major tourist attractions, and again the routes into the towns. So they're our priority. The smaller settlements which don't have any of those assets will spray the main street through the settlement only. So we don't have the resources to spray every street in every town, every settlement.
Thank you, Ken. With regards to the Friends of, it would be maybe helpful if the terms of reference, I know there's one in Ellen, so if you have a terms of reference from them, if you could forward on to the Ward 3 councillors, and then we can pass on to Invercare Community Council for them to consider. that would be useful. Councillor Bernard.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you for all the hard work that you and your team's put in. It's much appreciated by me, however. Two things. Your equipment, how clapped out is it? I had occasion to ask you a couple of weeks ago, one of your colleagues a couple of weeks ago, regarding Tyree playing, Tyree School, the playing field there and the grass being cut and being left behind. And I was told it was the equipment that was faulty. That's of some concern. Another question I have to ask is the back roads and side roads that we've got in our areas, the verge cutting. I know on two roads that I travel on a regular basis where the verges haven't been cut back for at least 12 months, if not longer. And there are certain places there where you couldn't pass, or you couldn't pass sensibly to people, or if it was a pedestrian, they wouldn't be able to get out of the way of a motor vehicle. Now, I know that's probably to do with you and the roads department, but how much communications do you have between them? And that's it. Thank you.
Chair, I'll just come back on a couple of those points from Councillor Menard. Thanks for that. We have a whole range of different types of equipment, so we have different types of machinery. So the incident in Tyree, I'll look into that, but that shouldn't be the case that teams are cutting with inappropriate machinery. I think it's fair to say that our fleet colleagues are in a similar position to us, that their money's tight for them as well. So we are seeing equipment, the lease period in some of the equipment getting extended, and obviously if you have older equipment, it's more prone to break down, particularly working in public areas as we are, because often these areas there's things left in the sward which can damage machinery. But we have a range of equipment across the Shire, so there should be no excuse for using the inappropriate piece of equipment for a piece of ground. So I will look into that. I would just say that as a result of the cuts that education have made, we are cutting education sites on a 3-weekly cycle. So that's every 15 days now. So we're cutting about 11 times a year rather than 14 to 16, which is what we would cut normally our grass on. As for the rural verge, Chair, that's now been taken back in-house by the roads department. So they are managing the whole of the rural flail contracts themselves. In previous years, members will know that we administered it on behalf of the roads department, but they're taking it back in completely. If Councillor Menard can pass on the details of the particular routes that have been raised with them, I'll certainly speak with roads colleagues about that and get one of their officers to make contact with you about it.
Thank you. Well, I'll email you later on.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor James Adams.
Thank you, Chair. Ken, just inquired as what the policy is regarding our football pitches. I've had quite a few instances this year of local clubs or teams getting in touch, saying they've turned up to play their matches or their galas, and that their pitches have either not been cut or cut, but the grass left in clumps, leaving the surfaces near unplayable. So if you could just let me know what the policy is there and how I could assist these teams. Thank you.
Okay, again, the football pitches, it was classed as general amenity grass, so all our grass is cut on a 10-day cycle. Again, I'm not sure whether you were in at the time, Councillor, but I was talking earlier that there can be a whole range of factors which can extend that period. Poor weather, staff sickness, vehicle breakdowns, or burials, which can have an impact on the rest of our grass cutting. However, if teams or communities let us know when the particular, and many communities do this, they'll let us know when there's an event on. We'll ensure that we get that cut before that event in plenty of time. So if there is sometimes with football it can be quite challenging, because I know that from my two boys play football for a local team in the village, and often fixtures can be arranged at very short notice. So that can be a bit of an issue. But if there's an event taking place which is set in a diary, and we can be notified about that, we can make arrangements that grass is cut ahead of that event, so it's not encountering large clumps of grass or problem sites.
Thank you. Appreciate that again.
Thank you, Chair.
And just a further clarification, is it 10 working days or 10 weeky days? That
10 working days, so it's not every fortnight, but obviously with bank holidays throwing there, that might be 11, but it's 10 working days. So
Thank you, Chair. From now on, I'm going to stick my hand up physically because it must have been my updating the computer here because it lowers my hand automatically. We noticed you have spoken. So I think it's a cunning plan by somebody to stay. But anyway, I digress. Yeah, a lot of points have been made here, but I think, Ken, with the budgets, in my opinion, you're not getting enough, to be honest, but the money is short. If you compare it with some of the other things that money's been spent on. And Councillor Cox mentioned about the people's priorities. Well, people want their towns and villages to look good. And they are going out and doing it themselves anyway. And as you say, that's the thing. I've got a neighbour who will remain nameless, and he noticed the gullies, the gutters were rammed full. There were little gardens, so he took a trailer out and he dug it all out himself because he kept complaining about it and nothing happened. So he just did it. You're going to get more people to do that sort of thing. So we've got to be less risk averse and actually help them to do this. If I mention the group boxes, I know we're coming up to summer, but the whole thing with getting communities to take over the group boxes, well, what was going to happen? Well, we take on the group box, but we'll inspect you, and you've got to have the right kind of grit. You've got to have all these things. So all these council officers, we can get work at it, where the communities were wanting to make sure that they didn't slip down the road and damage their cars. It's that kind of thing. And I do notice there's an awful lot of strimming going on. Yes, you're cutting the grass less at schools, but all the grass, because it's been left and just stripped, is getting dragged into schools. So again, that's another cost to another budget. Oh, it's confusing because the ECS budget you're cutting for the schools, so it's the schools budget, but it's not here. So there's a lot of different money bits here, there, and everywhere. And Councillor Reynolds' point, well, if you look at, for example, the cycle race that we had a couple of years ago, all the potholes were fixed in all those U and B roads. And we've just had the Portside Boat Festival, and I'm sure every bit of grass was picked up all around about Port Festival before everybody else turned up. So it's the people's priorities really what we want to do. And I think there are a lot of groups out there, but your point, Chair, on this in the perfect size of the community, where you look at Rose Arctic, for example, 1,000 folk and all the different groups all work symbiotically together to do stuff. And they go down and clean the beach, do it all properly. They go out to cut the grass, the uniform groups go out and weed the whole thing, and they get badges for it. And I think it's a Duke of Edinburgh Awards, some of them that they do this for these projects. So it's actually helping them to help us a lot of the time. And I'm using the group boxes, and I'm going to mention any of the snow warden scheme, where people had to be trained on how to use a snow spad. So let's be less risk averse and let's be more helpful towards them. Yeah, your point on safety is well made, and insurance, etc. But people are actually genuinely want to help us. They see the situation we are with our budgets. And it's got to help them. I'll mention New Aberdour, right, for a wee place, there's about 200, 250 folk. They're running 2 toilets for the folk, for us, instead of us. They're running a hall, they're running the church. So there's folk out there that have got the capacity. I mean, we all say that volunteers are gold, that's all they are. But they're wanting to help. They really are. And if we don't actually facilitate that in the proper way, then people will go out and just do it themselves, like my neighbour. Points already made, you don't have to answer, Ken. And my last point is about your wee project at the Gameray junction on the A98, just to the east of Macduff. That seems to have worked. Is it Yellow Ragwort or something it's called?
Yellow Rattle.
Yellow, I've almost got it right. Yeah, it seems to work. I don't know how the rest of the projects have gone, but I am getting my inbox with folk not being able to see the cars coming down the Y for the landman. I'm not getting my inbox full of folks saying they can do that. So that yellow rattle's working. And that's a project that a little experiment that's worked. So more of those things, it's going to cost you less because you don't have to cut it. And it's been innovative like you have been, Ken. So compliment there and a wee nudge, maybe another way. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Ken, just a point. How closely are you working with the community payback guys? Because, you know, we need to be able to get these guys to be doing some of the work that you don't have the capacity to do. Yes,
Chair, we are working with them. Jim's who's on the call here. We have a monthly meeting, and that's one of the standard items on the agenda is projects that we can give, and they are doing for us. So it is a group that we are working closely with.
Thank you. And just to learn something in your park, because we got at Wraithen Community Council last week, and the Wraithen, it's practically a single track road, and the children have to walk on the road to get to school because there's no pavements there. Now you're saying roads actually have taken that back into their budget stream. So while you're messaging them about the other roads, could you message them about that one as well, please?
I'll certainly give them a nudge and ask them to update you, Chair.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Committee, we'll go back to. What's my mouse?
Stick my back in the big bench, Chair.
Yes, you have. You're being asked to agree the allocated revenue budget for landscape services for this year, and I think the comments made have been valid enough. And the committee, we're not being asked to comment, but I think the officers have taken on board what's been said. And I'd like to thank you for the work you do. I know it's very difficult. I know that had we more money, we would be, you know, we would be doing the work absolutely perfectly. So committee, we are asked to approve the proposals. Do we agree those proposals?
Yes, we do.
Thank you. The next item.
Sorry, Chair, my wee handy's up.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, could we add a recommendation that guidance note is produced to issue to all the community groups what they can do and what they can't do, and what they can use and what they can't use? That would be very helpful. So there's no none of this heavy hand approach for people not to do anything at all. So my request is an additional recommendation, a guidance note is produced for the benefit of community groups. Thank you.
Actually, outstanding rather than, I'm not sure it's a recommendation given what the purpose of the paper.
We could
Take it to your outstanding business.
Our outstanding business, Councillor Cox, and our area manager can follow that up.
That's fine. Any route to take to produce this, I'm happy with, as long as it's something that's progressed. That would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reynolds.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Very quickly, but following on from what Councillor Cox has just said, I know that some community councils have received a really helpful information, which it may be in response to requests from them about which areas are actually, you know, within their geography, which areas are actually being covered by the council in terms of weed killing. And that is helpful to community councils and residents for obvious reasons, because if they are minded to do under the correct, the correct format, if they're able to actually do things themselves, they don't want to duplicate what the council is going to do anyway. So if something could be circulated along with what John has said to community councils, that would be very helpful to them. I mean, that, in the long term, that could be very beneficial, because there's no point residents are keen to participate, but they don't want to duplicate what the council is going to do, but they're not aware of what the council, which areas the council is going to cover.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Yeah. Okay, right. Item number 12 is Environment and Infrastructure Services Performance Report Q3, Q4 for Banff and Buchan, and we have Alan Wood to present the paper today. Good afternoon, Alan.
Good afternoon, Chair and Committee. Chair, as you say, the performance report is here. Very pleased to present the latest one for my directorate. and that is to the Banff and Buchan Committee. The report covers quarters 3 and 4 from last year, and should also be considered in the context of performance from earlier in the year, but also the same period from the previous year. So trying to give some context there with regard to the performance. Overall, very pleased to say the position is positive and is stable, with 10 indicators, all indicators currently meeting or exceeding the target, with no indicators requiring formal intervention. Chair, I've got a bit more to say, but just before I do that, in context, I am extremely aware and have listened to the last conversation that I'm here presenting 10 indicators that are green and are on target. That doesn't suggest that everything is perfection within my directorate in terms of service delivery. I fully understand that, but in terms of the context of this report, the performance indicators are certainly positive and stable. First of all, looking at the sustainable economy indicators, the performance here remains consistently strong. Planning and building standards indicators continue to meet the targets that have been set, with determination times for local developments remaining within the expected levels, time periods. This is consistent with the same period, but earlier in the year, where performance was also strong across these indicators, reflecting, I would say, effective management of workload and use of project management approaches as well. In terms of connected communities, street lighting performance is above target in the current period, with just over 75% of faults completed within 7 days. That's not something I've been able to say at each of my visits to your committee or indeed other committees. Does represent an improvement from earlier pressure seen both in previous quarters and in the same period of the previous year. In terms of living well locally, housing indicators, they also remain positive overall. Tenant arrears and void rent loss continue to perform within target levels. Performance on homelessness resolution times shows some quarter-to-quarter variation, as has been seen before, but still remains within the target in the current period, and also below the Aberdeenshire average as well. Taking all of these themes together, the current position reflects that continued strong delivery, as I've mentioned before. I think particularly in planning and housing, but also alongside improvement in areas that previously experienced some pressures. This is broadly consistent again with performance earlier in the year, and some areas represent an improvement. In summary then, I'm really pleased with the information I'm able to present today for Banff and Buchan. It's stable, it's improving. I recognise across the directorate as a whole, there's still areas to look at and improve on, but in terms of this, I would say back to that positive position. Chair, happy to take any questions or comments from yourself and committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Councillor Reynolds, please.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Alan, and thanks for coming before us today. It's really helpful. A few things, Alan, if I may. So, as I say, I don't expect you necessarily to come back on these now, but to take them away and reflect on the points I'm making. On the hidden void costs, Alan, the report highlights a good position regarding rent loss for sheltered housing as dropping to 5.4%. So that's good, but we really need information that challenges the total financial impact. So the raw monetary value is omitted. References to percentages are fine, but if we can actually include also the true cost of delays to the public purse, then that would be very helpful. Generic performance indicators. There are a lot of performance indicators in this report, Alan, that are pretty general in terms of the 24 to 29 council plan. What we're really looking for, and again, you will have heard from the previous report, and in fact, it was mentioned several times earlier today, we need a lot more area-based indicators. There's a lot of specificity needed to evaluate actual outcomes in Banff and Buchan. And it seems to me, Alan, that there really should be a bit of a shift, not in terms of these reports and representations, presentations made to area committees in the context of place plans. We need that, and Doreen has mentioned this in terms of data, much more localised information and indicators that are specific to Banff and Buchan, for example, rather than regional or wider. That would be helpful. On one other thing is colleagues that will be much more aware of the situation concerning these than myself, but previous committees, Alan, have requested briefing notes regarding harbour master plans and street lighting. Updates are often delayed, or they're just not forthcoming. So we really need these vital economic and community assets to come before us in terms of updates, Alan, and that smacks of not necessarily the best forms of communication. And the other thing is on that, to finish, capital delays, Alan. The report is absent in a number of respects regarding specific dates and costs of capital projects. We need proper timelines for infrastructure improvements and road maintenance, waste service, etc., specific to Banff and Buchan, rather than ambiguous regional trends. That's the end of my notes. I was falling asleep at the end of all that, so it was a busy night last night. That's what I'm saying.
So I can see, obviously, no football matches that took your interest, Councillor Reynolds. Through you, Chair, I'm extremely awake going through those comments. I will take up your offer, Councillor Reynolds, of coming back on some, but just let me touch on a few of those. In terms of void costs, I do see that in the appendix there, I have got some percentages and some figures, but not all figures for all percentages. I will look at that in terms of this report and can certainly provide both for this committee. So I'll take that away and give you both percentage and pounds. I absolutely agree. Both are the context is needed. You need to see both. Fine. In terms of generic performance indicators, I'll push back a bit on that. I don't think they're generic. I think these are the area-based indicators. I do accept that as we move through and more into the place-based modelling, then place-based indicators will come through and will be more informative and less generic. So that's work in progress. So think of area-based here, but yes, we'll move to that place-based, as will all directorates as well. Briefing notes. If there's briefing notes outstanding, I apologise. Certainly the two that you've mentioned there about harbour master plans and street lighting. I know street lighting, actually I was discussing it with Philip just yesterday in terms of some of the trends that we've seen, both in terms of street lighting replacements and in terms of column replacements as well. So there is something on the stocks on that one. So I'll look at both of those in terms of your ask. In terms of capital delays, I'm not aware of delays in terms of dates of projects, in terms of delivery and timelines for roads improvements not being communicated. I'm happy to look at that with the team, or happy to get more information, because the last thing I want to do is either be ambiguous or not clear on any of those. So again, happy to either get more information but come back on that as well. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Alan. The other thing, alongside street lighting, it was harbour master plan updates as and when. Yeah.
Okay, got both those. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you. Councillor Finlayson.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Alan. Potholes. In towns, they're not a priority, not a bigger priority as the ones out in the open on the roads, because they're less dangerous. Now, but they are reported an awful lot, right? And I can tell you a few of them that are actually getting deeper and deeper. But I do think there's a potential, most definitely over the summer, and you've got new people coming to the area, tourists, etc., the Northeast 250, where some of these potholes are going to cause problems. Some fender benders, some, as Councillor Cassie would say, collisions, shall we say. There's one specific one on the A98 as you're going down past the Macduff Harbour office and you're going round past the Chinese restaurant. It's a massive one. It must be about 8-9 inches deep, and people avoid it. They go out in the middle of the road. So there's a potential. I've had a few people coming down there and almost banging into me when I'm coming back up the road. There's ones outside the schools, like for example, Banff Academy. There's one where the teachers are all pulling in, and there's a big hole there. There's one outside Macduff Primary. So these ones have been there for a long time. All you've got to do is just check the database and when they're reported and the amount of times they are reported. They are not high up in the priority, but they're getting worse. And I have noticed some in the countryside, not particularly in Banff and Buchan. Like this, I'm not being flippant by this, but the people have put sort of traffic cones into them, and these traffic cones are like wearing down, you know, just to tell people watch out for these. I know there's a budget thing involved with it, obviously, and we're fixing the ones that are more dangerous out on the roads. But I'm just making a plea because they have to be fixed at some point. And this is the time to do it when the tar is at the right temperature, the road's the right temperature, etc., etc. I don't know what you can do about it, but I'm making the point, really. And most definitely, when you've got the North East 250, you've got the amount of people going through that are not used to these roads, and they hit one of them, or they go, oh my goodness, there's a hole, and they go out across the road. Just a point. You don't really have to come back, Alan, on it, but I'm just making the point from what my constituents making the same ones, especially the parents and the teachers when they're going into the school and they're rumbling around these holes getting into the schools. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Alan.
Chair, I will happily listen rather than respond in detail. Conscious the reports on the specific performance indicators, but I understand the importance of the topic raised by Councillor Findlater. So certainly I've taken a note of some of those specific locations as well. So I'll note that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Councillor Bell, please.
I'm not sure what I'm going to say should be fit for Mr. Wood, but I'll have a go anyway. I was thinking about, you know, that we may perhaps as a council need to have some meaningful debate about all the rules and restrictions and costs that are being placed on community organisations when they're trying to organise events in our different communities, because the costs are getting higher and higher for licences and different rules. And I know we have to adhere to all the different laws that are coming into play, but I think maybe as a council we need to have some really just meaningful debate to our communities on this. Because we have so many community groups who, during this time of year, go on all these different events, and it's good for tourism. It's certainly good for community cohesion. That perhaps we need to have a good hard look at it. But I'm not sure, Chair. I hope I'm not out of place taking it up here.
Well, it's not with regard to this paper, Councillor Bell, but I do think it's probably a business services item more than landscape services.
My apologies,
ENIS, I'm going back to the last paper. Councillor Findlater, you want to go back in? If it's about that, I think we need to leave that today because it's just not.
There'd be some outstanding business on it because Councillor Bell's right.
Yeah, we'll just we'll leave it today because it's on this paper, okay?
I apologize, Chair.
Thank you. Right. I don't see any further comments, hands up for Alan. So on page 88 of the paper, we're asked consider to provide comment to the services and progress made in relation to environmental and infrastructure services indicators. And Alan has acknowledged that going forward, the place-based indicators will hopefully address some of the issues raised by Councillor Reynolds. So if we can put that in the comments, please. Some more information on capital projects in the area would be helpful, and briefing notes on the harbour developments and street lighting. And I would put in the need to look at the categorisation of urban potholes.
Yeah.
Alan, I haven't really said much, but what I would say is that with regards to the figures on here, your housing department are so good at addressing issues raised and dealing with constituents. In the past 2 quarters, I have had several constituents get in touch with me about various things, and the ability of your officers to respond has really been outstanding. So thank you very much for that. And thank you. I know we're all working on very difficult budgetary circumstances just now, so thank you very much, and pass on our thanks to your officers.
Chair, I certainly will appreciate your comments. Thank you very much.
Okay. Committee will now go on to item number 13, which is the business services and its area of committee performance indicator report for the event from April 25 to March 26. We have Rob Simpson, the Director of Business Services, in attendance today and presenting the paper. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Yes, Business Services Performance Report in front of you. So there are 15 indicators shown within the paper. 7 are on target, so showing as green. You have 1 indicator showing at amber, and 7 are data only, so demand-led indicators, generally relating to spend, but I say demand-led around community care grants, discretionary housing payment, etc. In terms of performance, it is relatively strong across customer services. So we have seen sustained good performance in terms of call abandonment rate, that is below target, and call wait times, which are consistently within the 5-minute target. And you'll see within your papers that that is in spite of an increase in the number of contacts that we have as a council. So I think that shows the good work of that team, but also we're putting the right resources in the right places to be able to deal with those increasing demands. In terms of the demand-led areas, so as I've touched on, we have community care grants, crisis grants, discretionary housing payments. Just to touch on a few, in terms of discretionary housing payments, we're seeing the annual spend increase in that area. We're seeing the number of applications for crisis grants increase as well. And I think this is showing that there's growing demand based on economic pressures. So cost of living is hitting people hard, and that is leading to people applying for those types of payments, which we process. Now, they're government funded, so Scottish Government funding that comes to us, and then we process those. We assess the claims and then pay out. But as I say, that is increasing, and it's increasing across Aberdeenshire. So we're seeing energy costs, for example, have been significantly impacting people, but just the wider cost of living, food prices, etc., impact there as well. In terms of properties, so you have the satisfactory and suitability factors within the report. You'll see the Aberdeenshire position for those, and you'll see that Banff and Buchan is slightly better than the Aberdeenshire position on both of those indicators as well. Now, while they're sitting at a reasonably high level, we do continue to look at the disposal pipeline of properties. So we do continue to look at are we going to bring properties up to standard that are not meeting the standard, or actually are they ones that we're going to be disposing of over the coming months and years? So that's something that we continue to work through as we assess the condition of our properties. I think that's all I really want to touch on, Chair. Performance generally strong, generally quite stable across business services. Primary risk that we're seeing is that rising demand for those demand-led areas and that cost of living impact that I've touched on. So tackling poverty and inequality work that goes on across colleagues within business services and the wider team within finance. I think that's really, really important. And suitability of estate is obviously still an issue for us as well, despite the high percentage that we have within the report. But I'm happy to pick up any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reynolds.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Rob. And I realise how busy you are, like Alan, so I really appreciate, we all appreciate, I'm sure, coming for us today. Quite briefly, Rob, I mean, this document basically, you know, there's a lot of focus within this on key performance indicators, quite rightly, such as invoice processing and FOIs, etc. But I think it's quite weak on feedback in terms of whether residents and local businesses are satisfied with the quality, in inverted commas, of the service received. I think, you know, future reports, it would be good if they included some sort of quarter area specific customer satisfaction or first point of contact resolution rates, because a lot of this information that I'm talking about processes efficiency, but it means little if residents' issues take multiple attempts to resolve. Rob, thanks.
Yeah, through you, Chair. I think that's absolutely fair comment. It's something we can look at taking in as we go forward. We're changing the way we measure satisfaction. So we're moving away from the IDP way that we used to measure satisfaction across the Shire. And we're going to be looking at lots of different, a suite of different indicators that come in to assist us with that. So we'll look at whether we can break that down onto an area level and whether we can get more informative position around the specific feedback that we're getting from residents and businesses, as you say, to bring through here, because I think it would be quite useful information for you. So leave that with us and we'll certainly pick that up. Thanks.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks.
Thank you. And Councillor Cassie.
Yeah, I'll be very brief. Good afternoon, Rob, and welcome. A couple of brief points. Very much welcome the drastic reduction in the abandonment rates compared to where we were a few years ago. Any idea as to what may have caused that? Because it was originally high due to high volumes of staff turnover and people moving on to new grades within the council. And the other point is the operational buildings across the council, as it were, which has got sort of 16.91% are buildings that are unsuitable for use. You say, are these the ones that we're going to get rid of, etc., etc.? Have we still got people working in these buildings that are unsuitable for their use?
So in terms of customer services, through you, Chair, in terms of customer services, yes, we did used to have a particularly high turnover of staff within that area. We also reallocated staff, so we're retaining more staff, but reallocated staff as service points have closed. That was part of that position. As service points were closing, the staff moved across into the contact centre. So we've got more staff answering the calls, and the call wait times have gone down, and therefore the less people are dropping off the phone line. So I think that's certainly a good position that we're in at the moment. In terms of suitability, some of those buildings will still have staff in them. A lot of the unsuitable, unsatisfactory buildings are things such as pavilions, toilets, those types of assets that we still hold. Not all of them are open. Some of them are closed facilities, but the ones that are open, we still have depots that may not quite meet standards, for example, and that may be down to accessibility rather than anything else. So it may be that it doesn't have disabled access. Those are things that we want to resolve going forward, but yes, there may still be some people working in some of those facilities.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any further indications. With regard to Councillor Carsey's point, Rob, perhaps a briefing note to local members on what buildings are up for disposal, which buildings are closed, etc., just so that we can get it straight in our own heads.
Yes, I think we've provided that for you over the last couple of years, so we'll update that and get it back around you so that you're aware of what is happening across your area. Okay,
thank you. So, committee, we are being asked to all acknowledge, consider and comment on the progress made in regard to business services performance indicators, and a couple of comments. So it would be useful to get customer satisfaction in information coming forward for the next as a briefing note, I would think. I don't think there was anything else except for the updated property list. And I'd just like to thank you and your staff for the work you do, Rob. The welcome, it's a really good reduction in the waiting times and abandonment calls, so well done. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Committee, I think it's 15:11. I think we will take 10-minute interval before we address the next item on the agenda. If you can switch off your cameras and we will halt the recording, and if we come back at 15:30, let's do 20 past. 20 past, yes, 20 past. 15:20. Okay, thank you.